Good evening, everybody. Yes, that tune does finish rather abruptly, mostly because I never actually finished it. So there you go. That's as far as I got. So, good evening, good morning. I don't think it's good morning yet anywhere, actually. It's not even good morning here because you guys, your clocks have gone forward. So, it's 11 p.m. here in Edinburgh, Scotland, in the glorious United Kingdom. Hope everybody is doing really well, and I hope that we have no audio issues today. That is one thing I definitely want to not have, is audio issues. Yes, dinner time, Chicagoland time, says Steve Ross, and the regular crowd are here, as Kyle astutely observes. Hello, everybody. Ken, Kyle, Just Bob, Beatrice, Dwight, and I think that's everybody so far. If you are watching and you have not posted in the chat, please do, because that way I know that you're here, and it just helps me to get to know everybody who comes and watches my show. Carl says, audio is go so far. Excellent. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. Yeah, I had some problems just earlier in the week, actually. I think it was Friday. I started my computer up on Friday morning, and there was no sound at all. Nothing. Which was odd, to say the least. So I went and checked my audio settings and found out that Windows had changed my default audio card all by itself. And it had chosen my second interface, which is used for screen capture and streaming. It's the way that you hear Studio One and my voice and everything else. And it had basically decided to change it to that. Now, the outputs of that interface go nowhere. They are not connected to anything. So that would explain why I couldn't hear anything. So anyway, I went and changed everything back to my 1824, which is what it should be. And the recording settings should be the other device. That should be the default device for recording, should be my other interface, and for playback and everything else it should be the 1824, which it now is. However, once I changed everything, it was like Windows completely forgot how I set everything up, so it cranked everything. Everything was really loud and really full of noise and hiss and all sorts, and I spent pretty much the rest of Friday trying to get everything settled. I have no idea what happened or why. It's just totally weird. But anyway, it meant that certain videos that I needed to make for some clients got delayed. So they went out today, actually, but they got delayed because I couldn't get the sound to sound anything like very good, really, at all. So so there you go. That's been the story of the latter half of my week, which is a real big shame, because I had been talking to Jonny Gibe on Friday morning. I think it was Friday morning. I was talking to him, and I was telling him that the new version of OBS, which I'm using, has an expander built into it now, which is great, which means that the audio quality that you guys should be hearing now should be a lot cleaner and a lot crisper. So especially when I'm not talking, you should literally hear nothing. That's what it should sound like, because the expander is built in, because I have otherwise no other way of doing it, because the 1824 does not have built-in fat channel DSP, unlike the Studio 192 and the 192 mobile, which those devices do, and Jonny has one of those, which is why his audio is nice and clean. And you know, on his show the other night, he was showing, you know, kind of like how the expander works in the fat channel, and that kind of makes his audio nice and clean. So I'm very happy that there is one in OBS now, because it means my audio is nice and clean as well, which is great. And Steve is saying it seems to be working well. Yes, it does now. And I tell you what, this the expander that is now built into OBS is awesome. I have tweaked nothing. This is just the default settings, and it's just amazing. It really is just amazing. So anyway, so there you go. That's that. So I hope everybody's doing well. Now, if you got my email, if you're subscribed to my email list, you will have got the email. But if you are not subscribed to my email list, then in the description below this stream, there should be a link there to my email list. Go and hit that and get yourself signed up for my email list. What you will get is you will get my 5-part series on compression. You'll get that, which you can just download and have on your computer forever. It's unlike YouTube, there are no adverts or anything like that, so you can just watch those at your leisure without being interrupted. And the other thing you'll get is you'll get the stems to my song Chanel from my Belonging to Tomorrow EP, and you can mix that song and use it to attract clients, so you can use it in your portfolio and all that kind of fun stuff. So go and do that. And also you get emails about what I'm up to and what is going to be in the Sunday Night Live show. So if you got that email, Just Bob says, I sound great. Well, that's awesome. Thank you, mate. If you got my email, you would find that tonight's discussion is going to be my talking point. I like to call it a talking point. I don't know where that came from or how I came up with it. But if you guys can think of a different name for it, that would be good. It's the only thing I could think of. Is mix bus processing. And I've literally not said anything further about that. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. What it is, and why it's really good, why it's really cool, and why and how it really helps kind of shape your mix from the start. It's good, starting on the mix bus is a good place to start for your mix, because you get to shape the overall tone of the mix before you've done any other processing. And then you mix through that processing. And it's just a really, I've been doing this now on the mix bus. I've been doing this on the mix bus for maybe a couple of years, maybe 3 years, something like that. I mean, forever. I've always had like a compressor on the mix bus, and I've always mixed through that compressor. That's been my mixing methodology forever, for years and years. But really, it's only been maybe the last 2 or 3 years when I've started to kind of expand that out into using a tape machine and some EQ as well. Which is something I'd really hitherto not really thought about. So we'll unpack that a little bit. I think in my 5-part compression series, if you are subscribed to my email list, there is a section there that's on mix bus compression. So, I mean, that's something I do routinely do, but certainly haven't really done the whole tape machine thing and the EQ thing much beyond maybe the last couple of 2 or 3 years. So we will unpack that a little bit. Deer Creek is here. And he asks, is the OBS expander the box? Disable Windows audio ducking, uncheck that box. No. The OBS expander is built inside OBS. I don't think it has anything to do with Windows audio ducking. Not that I know of. It's basically it's one of the filters that you get when you click the little cogwheel in OBS in the mixer. There's like a filter button. If you press the filter button, then a whole bunch of options come up and you can add certain filters. So for example, you can have a noise gate, a noise suppressor, there's a limiter there now, and there's an expander. And I'm just using the expander at the moment. So that's all that is. So yeah, and I think it works really well, really nicely. So it makes video making a lot easier. For me anyway, for me personally. I find it helpful. So, let's see, how many people do we actually have watching tonight? Be quite good fun to find that out. There we've got about 14 or 15 people here, which is cool. So we're going to get on to questions in a wee while. So hold your thoughts on questions that you've got, and we'll get into those in a minute. If you're wondering what the intro music was, the intro music was one of the music loops from the Persona Symphonic Orchestra package, which I've done a series on reviewing. Basically, I go through I'm a little bit kind of anal about it, and I kind of went into a whole series and did like one on each section of the orchestra and that kind of stuff. And it comes with a whole bunch of music loops, and that's one of them. And I just added drums and bass to it because I thought, yeah, it sounds kind of funky on its own, but I wanted to really give it a real sense of a bit of some much more forward motion. So I just added some drums and some bass to it. So there you go. That's what the intro music was. I really didn't have much in the way of writing of that at all. Okay, so let's get into mix bus processing. So we need to go over to Studio One to do that. And Just Bob has been playing with the PSO today. Yes, it is lots of fun. I mean, you can't compare the PSO to one of the more really expensive libraries like the Vienna Symphonic Orchestra or the East West or any of the LA scoring softwares. You can't. They are in two different leagues. I mean, that's like comparing, you know, Chicago Fire football soccer team to Manchester United or something like that. Or you know, FC Barcelona with Scunthorpe United. I mean, they're in two totally different leagues, really, and they're in a class of their own, to be honest. But if you were to kind of put them in a league, metaphorically speaking, I would say for the league that Persona Symphonic Orchestra are in, I would say they are probably top of the table, and several points ahead of everybody else. It's really good at the price point that it is, which is basically about $100, I think. I don't think it's much more than 100. Yeah, I think it's about 150. Something like that. But it's well worth getting to add to your palette. And just give you some other creative options. So anyway, so that's what that was all about. Okay. Mix bus processing. So what is mix bus processing? It is essentially what it says on the tin. You are processing on your mix bus. So all of your channels, all of your buses, everything sends the works, effects channels, everything gets summed to the mix bus, and then it goes out to your speakers. And so what we're doing is we're doing processing on this kind of like last line. It depends on which way round you think of mixing, really. I think of this as the first thing rather than the last thing, but a lot of people think of this as kind of like the last thing because everything gets summed to it. Whereas I think of this as my kind of starting point, and then I go backwards. Maybe that's because I'm Scottish, so therefore I must be backwards. I'm Scottish, I'm British, we must be backwards because, you know, we're an odd bunch of people. So I tend to think of this as kind of like the start rather than the finish. So there you go. I have just insulted every British person that is alive, which is very clever of me. So this is kind of where I start my mix. So this is the session for Paper Deity. If you've been following my Paper Deity mixing series, this is where we're up to. As you can see, there is literally nothing on any of the channels. I've got my my parallel sends all set up, and that is pretty much about it. And I've got everything routed through buses, and I've got my parallel buses there. They are all turned down. We will come on to those in a later video. But we have started, I think, the second episode, we started processing this song on the mix bus. And I thought that you know, in that short video, and Bobby Booth has just arrived. He says hello. Hey, Bobby, good to see you, buddy. Kirk says, can I just ask, is today's show the usual time? I'm a few hours off normal for me in the middle of the Pacific. 11:15 p.m. right now, having trouble trying to figure it out. I've started at 11:15. What are you, 11:15 p.m.? Well, that's the time here in Edinburgh, actually, 11:15 p.m. And the reason why I'm starting now is because that is 6 p.m. Central Time now, because your clocks have gone forward. So I needed to adjust so that basically every show is always 6 p.m., whether it's summer, winter, spring, summer, or fall, basically. So basically I make sure that it is just me that adjusts, and I said basically too many times in that sentence. So yes, your brain is not deceiving you, Kirk. I think we are at, I guess because you're at sea, you're probably at Universal Time, which would be the same as Greenwich Time. So there you go. Oh no, okay, I misread what you said. It's 1:15 p.m. in the afternoon for you. Okay. No, it's 11:15 p.m. here. So I guess that means you're about 10 hours or so. I can't do math. Somebody work it out for me. Okay, let's get into this mix bus processing stuff, because you guys are probably going, come on, get on with it. So I shall. So in my video for the Paper Deity series that I just did on Thursday, I started to process the mix bus of this session. But I kind of realized that I hadn't really unpacked why I do it. I kind of showed you what I did, and I hadn't really gone into a whole lot of detail as to why I start over here. And I think it boils down to a mixing philosophy for me anyway, as much as it's a methodology. It's a philosophy for me as well. My feeling is if I can shape the overall tone of the entire mix before I've started doing anything and get it sounding good out of the gate, then it's going to make all the processing that I do subsequently a lot easier. That's my feeling, and this is, you know, this is not something I've been taught. Nobody's actually taught me this. This is kind of something I've arrived at through, as I say, maybe 2 or 3 years of experimentation with this. Now, as I said, I've always had a compressor on my mix bus, and I mix through that compressor. I've always done that, and the rationale for doing just a little bit of compression on the mix bus for me has always been about basically gluing the whole mix together before I start. And being able to tame the very, very, very peaks, the very tops of the mountains before I start. And it just brings the whole mix together in a very pleasing way. Especially when you do it right and you get the attack and the release just right, you know, certain elements of the mix start to fall into place without you really doing anything. So it's for me, it's about, I start macro. I start my mixing macro, and then I dial into the micro. That's my mixing approach. I think a lot of people do it the other way around. They kind of like to go, right, let's get into the details of notching out very surgical bits of EQ and that kind of thing on individual channels, and then they go macro, and then they finish up with the mix bus, and that's kind of where they, you know, that's their glorious finale, is to process the mix bus. I'm very much the other way around, macro first and then micro. So yeah, that's kind of where I start. So the first thing I do, and I think I showed this in the video, but again didn't really thoroughly explain it because I really want to limit those videos to like 20 minutes or 30 minutes at the very most. And actually, you know, that whole mixing series is basically an opportunity for you to see me work and see what I do for my clients, or in this case, this is my own song, so if I mess it up, it's on me. So I start usually, in fact, I think I showed in the video that I started with the tape machine. That's the first thing I got in, was the J37 tape machine, which is here. And I didn't really touch anything apart from turn up the input and outputs. The input and output are linked by default. And I basically just turn up the input until I'm hitting maybe about a couple of dB shy of 0 on the VU meter on the tape machine here. If I'm kind of hitting around there, then I'm kind of good for the mix. And I do occasionally also experiment with the tape speeds and the different tape types. Sometimes I will. In this case, I think I just left everything default because I actually liked it on this song with the 815 at 15 inches per second. I kind of liked the slow tape speed and this particular type of tape. I think this is the Ampeg tape. I can't quite remember which it is. But yes, I've actually seen this tape machine in action at Abbey Road Studios, because I lived in London for about 12 years and worked as a session musician, and got my start as a mixing engineer down there as well. But I didn't actually work in Abbey Road as a mixing engineer or anything like that. I did some session work there for a film score. And one of the things that we got to do was we got to do a tour of Abbey Road Studios, and I got to see all of their different tape machines that they've used over the years. And I got to see the real thing, the real J37 tape machine, and it is a thing of beauty. And they look after those tape machines extremely well, by the way, down there at Abbey Road. It's a real labor of love. But anyway, so that's kind of where I start. And then once I've done that, then I get into some compression. Now, if I'd had some of the extra money, I would have got the Waves version of this. But the next thing I go and do is I go and do my compression. And I'm using the Fat Channel Brit Comp, which is kind of a little bit like an SSL, an SSL-G bus compressor. And had I had the extra money, I would have got the Waves, what's it called? The Waves Master bus compressor, if I'd had the extra dough to get it. But didn't really have it in the budget, so I had to get this guy. So I had to use this guy from Presonus, and actually this is pretty good. I actually like this. I like the sound of this probably as much as the Waves, and I had the Waves on a 14-day trial, and I really quite liked it. The other option I have here is the Nomad bus driver, which I also like. But again, I've only got that on a trial, and it kind of drops out every 30 seconds, I think, or something. No, 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes it drops out, and you have to kind of reset it and everything, which is a bit of a pain in the butt. Until I can afford to actually upgrade the license to the paid license, and then all of that will go away. So yeah, so I'm using this guy, and at the 100 millisecond release, 30 millisecond attack at a 2-to-1 ratio, and then I just dialed back the threshold until this needle was barely moving, and I basically parked myself kind of round about here in the song. So this is round about the chorus, because the chorus is the loudest bit in the song. It's the fullest part of the song. Okay, Just Bob, I'll get you a question in just a minute. So this is kind of where I set my bus compression. I find the fullest part of the song. Now, in this case, it's the chorus of this song, where there's most going on and most density. And then I'm looking to kind of just budge this just a tiny little bit.
Steal or trade your soul.
Here comes the chorus.
To burn. In God we trust, says on the bill. From boom to bust.
See how it's hardly moving?
It can steal your life, dominate your goals, make you trouble and strife. Seek another soul, this little paper deity.
So basically it barely moved, it barely got out of bed, and that's kind of how I like it. I want this to be subtle. I don't want to be kind of up anywhere near sort of 4 dB. So kind of I'm pushing maybe 1.5 dB into this guy at this point in the mix. Now, obviously, as we're adding EQ and compression to other buses and other channels individually and all of that, that's going to send more volume, more signal to the bus compressor, and I will have to go back and adjust. But for now, this is kind of where I start, just kind of barely kissing the needle with the slowest attack and the fastest release time. And then I kind of leave it and I make up the gain just a little bit. And then I leave that at that. And then this is the kind of the new bit. I say new bit. This is maybe the new bit from maybe the last year or two, where I've done a little bit of EQ. Normally, I would have just done tape machine and compressor and leave it at that. But now I do a little bit of tone shaping with the EQ. So let's bypass this EQ. And we'll go back to the same section. And we'll go back to the start of that same section. And we'll play this without the EQ. And then I'll bring the EQ in. And hopefully you'll be able to hear the difference. Now, bear in mind, as you can see, these are tiny little boosts and cuts. Nothing really much to worry about. And the reason for these tiny moves is because if I do anything drastic, I have to bear in mind that everything is going to this EQ. Every instrument, every element of this mix, every voice, the whole lot is going to this EQ. So if I do anything drastic, it's going to drastically affect everything. So I need to make this subtle. And it is really about the small, subtle moves that add up to a big result ultimately when I get further down in the mix. So that's kind of my philosophy with this, really. So let's play this without the EQ, and then we'll bring the EQ in.
Steal or trade your soul for bands to burn. In God we trust, says on the bill, from boom to bust. Make it a thrill. It can steal your life, dominate your goals, make it trouble and strife. Seek another soul, this little paper deity.
Alright, let's bring the EQ in and we'll compare.
Steal or trade your soul for bands to burn. In God we trust, says on the bill, from boom to bust.
Let's take it out again.
Make it a thrill. It can steal your life, dominate your goals, make it trouble and strife. Seek another soul, this little paper deity.
So I think for me, what I'm hearing, albeit I'm listening to this with headphones for the sake of doing the show, you guys may well be listening on speakers, hopefully. So essentially what I'm doing here is a little subtle boost round about 80, and that's actually just to bring up a little bit of the punch of the kick drum in particular, but byproduct of that is the bass is also coming a little bit further forward in the mix. Then we're scooping out a little bit of some of the darkness that's particularly in the Fender Rhodes. Fender Rhodes kind of hovers in this area anyway, certainly with this song, because a lot of where the Fender Rhodes is being played is in the mid-range of the piano, kind of round about middle C area anyway. Middle C and kind of maybe down to the C below middle C. That's kind of where the Fender Rhodes is hanging out, and that's kind of this area. And so it tends to darken up a little bit here. So I am pulling out just the merest 1.4 dB from this area. Then I'm opening up the upper mids here. Now I'm doing this to kind of just brighten up the vocal a little bit, and also bring that ride cymbal up a little bit, because the ride cymbal is a little bit of a dark thing. It's a 22-inch ride cymbal that we have on this session, and it has a little bit of a darker tone to it. So I'm brightening that up just a little bit, but trying to avoid the harshness of the crash cymbals. So that's why I kind of went for this 3K kind of area. If I'd moved it up a little bit, we would have got into the kind of the harsher elements of the vocal, and we would have got into the harsher elements of the crash cymbals, which I didn't want. I just wanted to bring up that ride cymbal in particular. So there it is, really, and I've got like less than a dB up around about 14K to add a little bit of crispness to it, to the upper partials, the air kind of area of the mix. Bring that out a little bit. And so already the mix sounds considerably better with all of those engaged. So what we can do is we can turn off the entire chain, and we can do a little bit of an A/B with everything off and then everything on, and see if this has made a difference. So let's kill it just now, and we'll start with it off.
Steal or trade your soul for bands to burn.
Kick it on.
In God we trust, says on the bill. From boom to bust, make it a thrill. It can steal your life, dominate your goals, make it trouble and strife. Seek another soul, this little paper deity.
So already, right out of the gate, it sounds, to me, I think personally, it sounds better with everything on than with everything off. With everything off, there is literally no processing on anything at all. All we've got really is just these 3 plugins. So the whole mix is being shaped by these 3 plugins. And to me, it just brightens up the whole song and brings the whole song together, brings certain elements forward, like the vocal comes forward a bit, the snare drum comes up a little bit, the kick drum has a little bit more roundness, and the bass guitar comes forward a little bit more and has a little bit more punch to it. And certainly the compression there, I think, helps as well. And then, of course, then you've got a little bit of the tape going on as well. So for me, this kind of gives me confidence going forward into the mix, because I've shaped some of the tone of the mix already and got it sounding pretty good. So going forward, the mix can only get better, or I can monumentally screw it up. But certainly it can really, to all intents and purposes, this mix really should only improve from this point. Otherwise, I would have to then go and make some drastic changes. But so now that I've got this all set, I will now leave this for the entire mix. I'll leave these guys engaged for the entire mix. And we will periodically, as we go through the next several videos in my Paper Deity series, we will periodically revisit and make sure everything is good, and make sure the bus compressor is not getting kind of over compressed. And if it is, we'll just dial it back a little bit. Same with the EQ. If we need to dial it back, we'll dial it back a little bit. So we'll keep an eye on these guys, but for the most part, they are going to stay as is, and we are going to mix through them, is what we're going to do going forward. So stay tuned for Thursday's episode of my Paper Deity mixing series. That'll go out, as I say, on Thursday. And I'm looking forward to this one, because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of mixing over here on the buses. And then we will, anything in the individual channels as we mix on the buses, if anything on the individual channels basically raises its hand and says, hey, come fix me, we will. So one of the things we will do is we will get some amp sims going on these guitars and on the bass as well, so that they sound a little bit more amped, so to speak. I think that will help, because our tremolo guitar is a real guitar, but this Les Paul guitar is a little bit of a fake guitar. It's certainly, to anybody that is a guitarist who's in the show tonight, must have heard that that is a little bit of a fake guitar. And it is. It sounds a little bit more synthy than anything else, but I've called it Les Paul guitar because it kind of sounds a little Les Paul-like. But it does sound more synth-like than anything else as well. So that might be a misnomer. But so we will get some amp sims on these guys and get them sounding good as well. And then, as I say, it'll be whatever pops up and says, hey, I've got an issue with this. Can you notch me out, or can you boost me? But for the most part, the next maybe 2 episodes of the video series are going to be focused here around the buses. So that is mixed bus processing. And if you've got any questions on mixed bus processing or anything else, get them in just now, and we will devote the rest of the show to that. And I'm happy to run over a little bit if needs be, so don't be shy about your questions. And we'll flip over to hello. Now you can see me again. We'll flip over here and you can see me again. Mika Han says, I love the simplicity of your final processing. Sounds great on my speakers. Good. I appreciate that. Steve Ross says, nice subtle additional pop to the overall sound. Yes, that's the intention. So I'm glad that that is coming through. Let's see. And you guys are all kind of like saying hello to each other as well. But I think there was a question, and I need to kind of pop up and look at it. Kirk says, Les Paul, definitely more ip-ish rather than actual. Yes. Yes, I did fake it, mostly because I couldn't actually play the strumming pattern. That was the problem. On this song, basically, I am playing pretty much everything, apart from the tenor sax solo. Everything is... Oh, and the drums. I'm not playing drums on this, but I'm playing everything else. But yeah, the Les Paul thing, I couldn't play the strumming pattern. I just couldn't get it in time. It sounded lame as... And that's mostly because I'm not a very good strummer. Even at this kind of slow tempo, I'm not a very good strummer. So I basically had to fake it. And the way I faked it was I used the a Les Paul patch in the Presence XT. And I put the Corda effect. If you've ever come across the note effects in Studio One Professional, if you have Studio One 4 Professional, you have access to the note effects. And I used the Corda, and there was a nice little pattern that it created there in the Corda, and I could basically just voice the chords on this elderly gentleman here and let the Corda play the strumming pattern. It kind of works, sort of, but it sounds more like a synth than anything else. Bobby Booth says, is the J37 on the Master the only time you use it? Yes, it is. Currently. Ken asks, can you talk a bit about the mindset of struggling with tweaking single tracks versus going back to retweak the mix bus if your initial settings on the mix bus turn out to be less than optimal? Oh, that's a great question. Can I talk a bit about the mindset of struggling with tweaking single tracks versus going back to retweak the mix bus if your initial settings on the mix bus turn out to be less than optimal? Yeah. I try to get it optimal to start with. Obviously, I'm not going to achieve that necessarily every single time, but I try to. And I think what we did there at the end of the demonstration is critical. A-Bing it to make sure that what I have set is working. And if it's not, I'm going to go and fix that. But when I do get into working on the buses and the individual channels, obviously all of that is then going to be dumped into the mix bus. And so extra gain, extra volume is going to go into that mix bus. So, you know, that compressor needle is going to start to move a little bit more. Now, I think I have the attack and release set exactly right. It's not overdone, it's not underdone. It's perfect, I think, because you don't really hear the compressor. You don't hear it pump. You don't hear it grab. But you do hear it bring everything just ever so slightly more together, and the kick drum comes forward, and the bass comes forward, and the vocals come forward. Those are the three elements that I try to help bring forward with the mix bus compressor. So if I find as I go through the mix that it's starting to pump a little bit, or everything's starting, I can hear the compressor starting to work, then I go back. I go back. And what I will do when I go back, if I go back to Studio One, what I'll do when I go back is I will reopen this guy and I will adjust the threshold. I'll leave the settings, but I'll adjust the threshold because I think these are good. I'm going for the 2-to-1. Some people use the 4-to-1, but I'm going for the 2-to-1 because I want this to be subtle. I don't want this to be over aggressive. Now, there are certain styles of music where maybe a 4-to-1 would be more appropriate. You know, like if what you're doing is heavier, harder rock, maybe you would set this to 4. And you'd be happier to push this towards 2 dB worth of gain reduction on average. Whereas for this style of music, I'm basically wanting the needle to basically just occasionally go, oh, okay. That's it, you know. So I think I've got this set right. But if after some processing is taking place in the mix, more gain is being added to the compressor, then what I will do is I'll just go and adjust the threshold back, just to try and keep this kind of, okay, kind of barely moving, barely, you know, sitting up and paying any attention compression setting, which is kind of what I want. I want it to not go anywhere near 2 dB. 2 dB is probably my maximum ceiling for bus compression through the whole mix. So if by the time I get to the end of it and it's going up towards 4, I'll dial it back. Or I'll go back to my channels and I'll dial back some of the compression on there. Because you have to remember, and this is the critical factor here with any processing that we're doing, the thing you have to remember is that everything has a cumulative effect. So what I'm doing here in the bus compressor here, any other compression is going to be compressed again. So if I have like 3 or 4 dB of compression on my bus, let's say my lead vocal bus has 4 dB of compression going on, but then I've got another 6 dB of compression going on over here. Maybe I've got stacked compressors over here. You know, maybe I've got an LA2 style compressor going into a Fairchild 670 or something like that, that kind of style compressor. Then, you know, that's going into whatever is on the lead vocal bus over here. So if that's like got 6 dB and this has got 3, then that's 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9 dBs worth of compression on the vocal channel. Is that going to be appropriate for this style of music? Or is, you know, that might be a little bit too much. So, you know, and if I find that that's affecting my mix bus, then I'm going to have to go and dial back here and dial back here a little bit. So I'm unafraid to do those kind of things if I have to. For some reason that got hidden. There we go. So, Ken, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, then please do say so. Sheila says, I fake it all the time. Okay. Mika says, it's very hard to mix your own vocals. How are you feeling about your vocal mix so far? In my opinion, it needs to come to the fore a touch more and some high frequency processing. Yeah, those are all very, very good suggestions, actually, Mika. But as you will see in the mix, there is nothing going on at all. 0 plugins, nothing, no inserts across the whole mix. The only thing we've done is the mix bus processing. Okay, so, but you're absolutely right. There is quite a bit of low end in the vocal that needs to come out. There's some, you know, there's maybe some 400 that needs to come out as well. And maybe I maybe need to boost up at around 8K, 8 or 9K. I mean, those are the kind of things that are going in my head just now. But yes, you're absolutely right. It can be very hard to mix your own voice. Because when you're hearing your own singing voice coming back out of the speakers, it sounds different to how the voice sounds to you kind of naturally. Like, you know, I'm listening to my own voice as I'm speaking to you guys. It's coming through these headphones, and to me, my voice sounds very different to how I think it sounds. And I've had to, over the years, I've had to get used to that. I mix all of my own records. So over the years, I've put out maybe 5, 6, 7 records, and I have mixed pretty much all of them. I think there was only one where I actually shared the mixing duties, but pretty much I have mixed all of my own songs, and I have performed the vocal on all of them. So I've kind of got used to it. I kind of got used to what my voice sounds like to me, and also what it sounds like coming through the speakers as well, which are two totally different things. I've got used to how that sounds. Now, I know that there are certain things that my voice does that aren't necessarily great. Like, there is a little bit of a nasaliness to my voice. I don't have to worry about de-essing quite so much because I have a little bit of a lisp. So I don't have to worry about that too terribly much, which is a good thing, which means I've got some room around the 5K area, which I wouldn't ordinarily have, to maybe do a little bit of a boost. So, but you're absolutely right, Mika. Mixing your own vocals can be, you know, it can be really hard to do and hard to get right. Big Ron is here. Big Ron, I think you're maybe new to my show. So that being the case, welcome to you. I'm very glad to have you here. And you ask, how can I pan overhead cymbals left and right in Easy Drummer? I don't have Easy Drummer, but I believe in Easy Drummer there is a mixer section that gives you, I think it gives you some EQ and some compression, and you can balance the faders a bit as well. And I believe there's probably even pan knobs, something like that. But what you might find is in softwares like Easy Drummer that the overheads tend to already be panned left and right because they tend to be set up as a stereo channel in a lot of softwares. I don't know specifically about Easy Drummer, but I think, you know, a lot of the drum softwares that are around do that. I don't know whether Easy Drummer does specifically. But yes, I'm not entirely sure how you would do that in the Easy Drummer GUI because I don't have it. So I'm sorry, I can't really help you with that. Also, Behringer B1 cheap mic. Can I use fat channel on input to shape vocals before hitting the track? Yes, you can, but I would say be careful. Be careful doing that because once you've done it, you can't undo it. So if you overcompress or you get the EQ incorrect on the way in and you print it and you've recorded that, it's in the track. There's nothing you can do to get it out. You'll have to change the settings and re-record, which if you've just captured a really good performance, that could be a right pain in the backside. So think very carefully about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Make some test recordings. That's the other thing I would suggest. Behringer B1, I have the C1. Do I have the B1 or the C1? I can't remember. I think I have the C1. I have the Behringer C1, but the B1 is fairly similar. And I think even the capsule is identical, I think. That being the case, you will find that there is a bump at about 400, somewhere between 400 and 450 on both of those microphones. There's a bit of a boost in the EQ of that microphone. It's just kind of, it's just there. That's the frequency response of that microphone. So if you are going to shape some tone going in, I would suggest maybe making a bit of a cut of 2 or 3 dB at around that kind of area. Kind of sweep and find it and then cut it out is what I would suggest. And then that way when you are recording to tape, you're recording to tape without that, so that when you mix, you don't have to worry about, you know, cutting that in the mix because you've already done it. I am a believer in processing on the way in. I think it's a good idea, but you really do need to make sure you know what you're doing before you do it. So that would be my perspective on it. Make sure you know what you're doing before you commit to tape, because you can't undo it. So be happy about your decision. Be confident about your decision. EQ and compression wise on the way in. Otherwise, you'll come unstuck, and you may well capture a fantastic performance, but it sounds bad, and you don't want that to happen. I do a separate. I guess I'd have to make another track and choose a different cymbal and pan, right? Maybe, I don't know. Mika says, well, I have to say that is a great sounding song without any track processing. Well done. Thank you very much, Mika. I appreciate that. And Big Ron watches JG. Yep, good. I think pretty much we all are fans of Jonny Gibe here. I think pretty much. Just Bob is talking to Big Ron and says, since on its own track, I'm assuming you want to do a double crash, one left and one right. You probably need a separate track. The cymbal would bleed into each. Okay, that's cool. Steve Louth, it says that yes, I can pan them in the mixer if I want to. I think you're talking about. I think you're talking about Easy Drummer there. I think that's what you're talking about. Woodbeast. Woodbeast says, "Who is Jonny Gibe?" That's hilarious. I like that. Just Bob says, yes, that's how we did it in the tape days. Yes, absolutely. Tape and console, that's how you did it. You shape the tone on the way in, pretty much. And that means that you have to commit to tape. And you know what? I'm going to take a little break. Hang on. Yes. Steve Louth, good question. Sorry, Steve. Have I misread your name? Steve Ross, sorry. I apologize. He says, generally I agree with you that you should record dry and then you have the power to shape the sound later. But if Big Ron hates an aspect of his voice, that always. Yes. Yes. If you know that there are certain qualities of your voice that are not going to come over well on a particular microphone, EQ them away going in. But you're right. There is a certain thing about having the power to shape the sound after the fact. So recording with no effects, with no EQ and no compression so that you can EQ and compress in the mix. Absolutely. And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it that way either. But there is certainly value to committing things to tape, I think, so to speak. And the value is that you make your decisions earlier in the process. So you're aiming much more to get it right at the source, so that you free yourself up to not get stressed about processing in the mix. You know, kind of like that whole fix it in the mix philosophy, which is totally counterproductive. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's what you're talking about here, Steve, because you're not, I don't think. You know, you're not kind of thinking, hey, we'll just capture this and then we'll fix it later. No, you're talking about shaping the tone after the fact. And I think, you know, there's value in both, shaping the tone on the way in and then enhancing that and making that fit in the mix when you're in the mixing phase. I think that's, you know, that's kind of like a good kind of balance as far as I'm concerned, between the two philosophies. And I think they are mixing philosophies, committing early on versus shaping things after the fact. I think both are very valuable and both are very, very good, and both are a good practice. But, you know, the downside, if there is one, of doing everything after the fact means that you're kind of putting off until later something that you could deal with at recording to make the recording sound awesome. You know, kind of like if you were to chop your production process into 3 sections, recording, mixing, and mastering, some people would say make the recording as quick as you can, make it as short as possible, then kind of like the bulk of the work is done in mixing, and then the, you know, kind of like the very slender section at the end is for mastering. Well, I would say record as if there is no mixing, mix as if there is no mastering. And then the mastering engineer ends up with a mix that he just goes, hey, there's nothing for me to do here apart from level match. Hooray! I can master this in under 13 seconds. You know, kind of that's kind of what I'm talking about. Kind of, instead of having a short recording phase, have as longer recording phase as possible, so that then the mixing phase becomes the shorter end of things. And I think overall you end up speeding up the entire process by doing it that way. I don't know if that kind of helps there, Steve, and contributes to your thoughts. I hope it does. Let's see. Big Ron says, can't figure out how to get a good vocal wet dry mix on phones. Oh, the chat just jumped because everybody's talking, which is good. Wet dry mix on phones with enough volume of the song. Presonus audio box. Most plugins on the track whilst recording big. Now here's the thing. If you put plugins on the inserts in Studio One on the channel that you're going to record on. So for example, we're going to record on this lead vocal. We're not, because I don't want to wreck this song. But if we were to be recording on this song, and I started chucking plugins at this insert section here, although I would be able to monitor it in my headphones, those plugins would not be recorded to the track. If you are wanting to record those plugins to the track, you'd have to put them over here on this input section. See, if you go over to this panel here, which I normally have closed, but if you hit the inputs button here, hey, look, there you can see, there's my inputs. There's my voice coming in, because it's actually going through Studio One in a roundabout kind of convoluted way. But, you know, if I wanted to EQ that, then I could do. And the way I could do that is by grabbing the Pro EQ and putting it on the left channel here. And, you know, I could give myself a little bit of high pass filter, go find that low mid area, pull that out, pull out a little bit of 500 because it peaks a little bit there. Open up some air, open up some maybe up mids, but I have to be careful because I can be a little bit nasally, and so on. So I can shape all of that, and then when I hit record, this EQ will be printed onto the track, onto this over here. This EQ will become part of this. But if this EQ is over here, then it doesn't. It doesn't get printed at all. But what you hear is the audio passing through it. So you hear the EQ, you hear the compression, you hear the reverb if you have a reverb on the send, but it never gets printed. Okay? So those are your distinctions that have to be made clear in order to understand what we're talking about here. What am I missing? Superior drummer better. I have heard that Superior Drummer is better than Easy Drummer. There's a lot of people that give it a lot more cred than Easy Drummer. And I've forgotten to switch my screens. Hang on just a second. There we go, I forgot to switch back. Yeah, there's a lot of people that reckon that Superior Drummer is better than Easy Drummer. I think they're different. I think they serve a different purpose. I would imagine that Superior Drummer has maybe a bit more flexibility than Easy Drummer, but I can't really speak authoritatively because I don't have either, unfortunately. And I'm smart because I was trying to use my mouse from my desktop computer to operate the screen from my laptop, which is really stupid. Just Bob is asking Big Ron, are you saying that the USB audio box USB doesn't get loud enough in headphones when doing vocals? Well, it does. I used to have an audio box USB, and the vocals that you hear on this song were all tracked through the audio box USB. And certainly you do get plenty of volume to your headphones, providing you have the headphone knob turned up sufficiently. You should be able to get plenty of volume. It should be fairly screamingly loud. If you're finding it's not, you could certainly invest in something like the HP4, which is a headphone amplifier. And you could run maybe an output into that. But you're limited with the audio box as to outputs because you've only got two. It's basically 2 in, 2 out, basically, the audio box. So you're kind of limited to what outputs you can have. So the headphone monitor thing might not be a good option for you. But certainly you could invest in something like the PreSonus Monitor Station V2, which I have here, and my audio box used to run through that as well, and then out to my speakers. But the monitor station has 4 headphone amps built into it, and they are screamingly loud. They will do some serious damage to your ears if you crank them. But really, you want to be careful about how loud you have the headphones when you're doing vocals, for 2 reasons. Number 1, bleed into the microphone. You don't want that. You want to capture as clean and clear a vocal as possible. That's the first thing to say. Second thing to say is that the louder the volume that you have in your headphones, the more your diction is going to suffer. And I've seen this, I don't know how many times. Thousands of times I've seen this where a vocalist, they say, I want more volume in my headphones, so you turn up their monitor mix. I want more, so you turn it up some more. And then they do a take, and they're slurring their words like they're a little bit drunk. But they're not. It's just that the headphones are too loud. And it's weird how it does this, but when the volume in your earphones or headphones is really loud, you start to kind of only half pronounce your words. I don't know why this happens, but it's just a phenomenon. It does happen. So those are 2 reasons to be really careful about having screamingly loud headphone levels when you're recording anything, really, but certainly vocals in particular, because you want to capture the clearest possible vocal. Excuse me. You want to capture the clearest possible vocal. And you want to be able to pronounce your words as clearly as possible so that everybody can understand what you're singing about, unless you deliberately don't want people to understand what you're singing about. So I hope that helps answer that question. I'm going to jump down the chat because I think I probably missed at least one or something. Just Bob says, please read Big Ron post at 7:02 and explain how to set it up. Big Ron, if you are on Facebook, could I recommend that you drop me a private message? You will find me on Facebook. I'm there. Just, do a search for Jonny Lipsham and then hit the message button. Send me a message. Explain to me kind of what you've got set up and how you've got it set up, and then maybe you and I could go one-on-one and I can talk you through the best way to get that set up. So I hope that helps you, Big Ron. Awesome. We'll do Facebook. Good. That's cool. Steve Louth says, it's also very useful drum editor to write your own grooves. Yes, absolutely. Editor to replace normal better MIDI grooves. So you guys are talking about Superior Drummer. Yes, Superior Drummer is very good. Easy Drummer is mostly presets with minimal adjustments. Superior Drummer starts off with raw sounds and incredible adjustments and envelopes for almost all parameters. Awesome. Yeah, I don't have either of those, unfortunately. but I do create my own drum parts. And I have used my elderly keyboard over here. This guy is a MIDI controller for decades. And I do all my drum parts on this. So if I'm sending a chart out to a drummer, like in the case of, I've used the same drummer for 27 years now, a guy called Dave Lightley. He's based down in London. He was in my band for about 20 years. And he's a terrific drummer. And so when I'm sending him a song that I want him to track drums on in his studio, I send him a backing track, which basically is just a roughed out guide of the song. So I'll do it on the Fender Rhodes, and I'll put vocals on there, and a click track, and maybe a shaker part or something along those lines. And I'll send that to him, and then he tracks drums to that, and then I bring his drums into the full final session and match everything up. But the other thing I do is I also send him a version of the song that has programmed drums on, so he has an idea of the grooves and the fills, the kind of things that I'm thinking of, because I am a drummer. That's kind of where I got my start in music. I started out playing drums in a youth big band, which won, the big band won an array of awards. We were, for a while, we were Europe's #1 youth big band, and I played drums in that big band. So that schooled me on things like reading charts, and it schooled me on things like playing exactly what's required for the piece, as well as chops. You have to have seriously good chops to be in a big band like that. So I kind of have an idea with songs that I'm working on, whether they're my songs or another client's song. I have a fairly clear idea what I'm after for a drum part. Now, I leave a lot to Dave's creativity because he is an extremely good drummer. He is a better drummer than I will ever dream to be. He has a vast array of chops that I just don't have. So, you know, I will suggest a drum fill, and then he will kind of take the bare bones of that suggestion, and he will do something uniquely Dave with it that just fits exactly, because I mean, we've worked together for so long that he kind of knows my brain a bit and knows how I work, and he knows what will grab my attention. So he will, you know, he'll play a fill that really grabs my attention, and I just go, yep, that's exactly it. That's better than I was thinking of. So that's the kind of drummer that he is. So I'll muck stuff up in Studio One, just tapping stuff in on here, and he likes my parts. Sometimes he'll say to me, "Hey, just use that. You don't need me." But most of the time, I'll say, "Shut up, Dave. Just do the chart, will you?" So there you go. Woodby says I sing like a castrated frog. Oh, good for you, my friend, because people need to know how to do that. Ken Moss says, I just bought the programming drums in Studio One course that you did for Dave Vignola. Looking forward to both of those courses. Good. Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate your support. I did that a little while ago. It might have even been 2 years ago. It was certainly in my old studio, which was much smaller than this one. Yeah, Dave and I hatched an idea that we were going to do a MIDI series, a whole bunch of videos that we were going to do. And we only ended up doing 2 series of the MIDI drums made easy. Volumes 1 and 2, and then there was going to be a 3rd volume, but we were kind of a little concerned that the second one didn't really take off as well. So the 3rd one is still kind of there in the back of our minds. We you know, if there is enough interest in it, we will make it and we will sell it if enough people will buy it, basically. But at the moment, we kind of didn't really think that there was enough of an audience for the 3rd one. The 3rd one was going to involve a lot more percussion programming, so programming conga parts, programming bongo parts, shaker parts, all that, any kind of percussion part that you might want to add to a song, you know, however authentically Latin percussion or not, you know, how you can take a conga part and fit that into a pop song like Sade has done on a few of her songs. Oh, there was a massive song of hers that she made very, very famous, Smooth Operator, which features a really nice little tumbao pattern on congas. And so, you know, that's an authentic tumbao pattern that just fits beautifully in that particular song. So you can take all sorts of Latin percussion styles and make them fit into a different style. So that was going to be the third series, and we may make it. Who knows? But there you go. Mika Hans says, try creating a vocal overdub bus to bus your playback track through at a low level. Route your overdub vocals through another louder bus. Balance the two. Set your overall levels and reset after. Okay, that's a long way round of doing it, but that may well work. Okay. Steve Louth asks, can you use Easy Drummer 2 in the pattern editor? I don't know. I don't have it, so unfortunately I can't answer that question. Maybe somebody excuse me again. Maybe somebody here in the show, in the chat, has one of those products and can answer that question for you, because I'm afraid I don't know. Where are we at now? Okay, we are coming up on 1:15. Sheila has to go, and you know what? I think I'm going to call it there as well. We've been on for an extra 15 minutes. Now, since we started, for me, an hour earlier, I didn't mind overrunning the show a little bit. So I hope you found tonight's episode of Sunday Night Live. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you have, please hit the like button. If you're not yet a subscriber to the show, please hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell next door to it, and you'll know when the next video comes out. But I'm going to tell you now that next video that will come out will be episode 3 of the Paper Deity mixing series, and that will be on Thursday. If you haven't followed the first 2 episodes, go watch them after this show, and you'll find that in the description box of the first 2 videos, you'll find that there is a link to the stems to this song, to Paper Deity, and you can download those stems and you can mix them yourselves. You can follow along with me and mix it in chunks over the next several weeks, or you can just mix at your own pace if you wish. You can certainly do that, and I'd be absolutely happy for you to use the song in your portfolio to attract clients. The only caveat being, you just need to credit me, Jonny Lipsham, as the artist, because it's my song and it comes from my EP paper. It comes from my EP belonging to Tomorrow, and the song is called Paper Deity. So go follow that link, get those stems, get mixing, and when we get to the end of this series, the final video, I will be creating a place where you can put all your mixes. So if you've been mixing along with me or you've mixed at your own pace, there will be a place where you can upload your mixes, and maybe we will do an extra special live stream where we'll go through some of your mixes and have a listen to kind of different ways, different approaches you've all taken. If you are up for doing that, or you would rather just have some private feedback from me, that's fine. If that's what you want, if it's just private feedback you want from me rather than kind of airing your laundry in public, so to speak, on a live stream, then certainly just, you know, let me know, send me an email, and maybe attach the MP3 to that email, and I'd be happy to get back to you on your mix. Absolutely. I think that'd be a really cool little added benefit to doing this series. So if you're up for that, is that where the toilet paper idea came from? No. No, that's just another little challenge to get your teeth into, writing a song about toilet paper without ever mentioning the words toilet or paper or toilet paper. But it needs to be about toilet paper. And, you know, kind of we need to... The lyric needs to be written in such a way that everybody knows it's about toilet paper, but you are not mentioning it by name directly. You may use metaphor, you may use simile, you may use pun, you may use any of the litany of literary devices that you can use that are available to suggest toilet paper, but without actually mentioning it. Okay, that's that particular challenge that Jonny and I have ongoing, and you can post your results, your MP3s over on Jonny's site. He has a page for that, so you can go and do that over there if you so choose. So I'm gonna, as I say, end the show there. I keep saying that and then not actually ending it. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming in to tonight's show. Let's go and have a look at where we are viewer-wise. We've got 19 in the room at the moment, which is awesome. I want to say a big thank you to everybody that has been and watched the show or is still here right now. Thanks a lot for your support. Appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe, notification bell, and please do follow the Paper Deity series. You'll get to see how I mix, and you'll get to see me develop this song from scratch. I've not touched this song in 3 years, and I'm going to approach this mix differently from the way I did it before. So it's not like I'm going to be mixing it again, kind of like just repeating what I did before, because that would be too easy. No, I'm going to approach this completely differently. Okay, so I hope that helps you all, and I will see you on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified, and my next video, as I say, will be out on Thursday, and then it'll be we'll be back around to where we are now. So I should bid you a very good night. Good night. Just Bob, I'm using, for the Paper Deity series, I'm using a mixture of third-party and native plugins. But you can mix it however you feel.